everyone, Peter here from the Esoteric Order of Gamers. It's a beautiful sunny Saturday morning here in New Zealand. We've got lovely natural light washing into the studio. I really should get out there in nature, but I've got to make videos for you lot. It's madness. I might even do a few rule summaries as well. Well, the EOG is a labour of love, but it takes up a lot of time, but I do enjoy doing it, and I do enjoy bringing you stuff. And today, we're going to talk about stuff. We're going to talk about terrain stuff. Now, I play all kinds of games, as I'm sure you know if you look at this channel. Everything from Victory Point board games to miniatures on tiles to adventure games to app-driven games to miniatures tabletop games and everything. But there is something that beats them all when it comes to spectacle, and that is a big tabletop miniatures game with lots of terrain and well-painted figures. As you know from some of my battle reports, I absolutely love putting on these big games with all that stuff because it just looks so cinematic. It's like you're in the middle of a movie. Even better than that, it feels like you're actually making the movie. So how do I do that? Well, terrain goes a long way to help in that regard. So I'm going to show you my terrain collection, which is over there. It's in my little ensuite bathroom here in my studio. So I'm going to take you into my bathroom to show you my terrain. Well, that probably came out a lot more creepy than I wanted it to, but here it is, my bathroom. And as you can see, it's absolutely chock-a-block with these containers. And you can see I've filled the shower recess because I don't use this shower at all with these containers, which are by a company called Systema, and they fit together quite nicely, and I've got them all labelled. As you can see, I've got them labelled on the fronts and on the sides as well in case I move them around. So let's have a look through some of these boxes and show you the terrain that I regularly get out of its boxes and set up every time I play a tabletop miniatures game. Well, to start with, one set of terrain that isn't in one of those boxes is in this, because this is such a lovely big box. It's the Necromunda Battlezone Frontieris from Games Workshop. And this is some really nice sci-fi terrain, fortifications, buildings, bunkers, call them what you will. And I've painted up this set relatively recently, and I've just started using it. You'll see it in my last Warhammer 40,000 battle report. And I'm going to be using that a lot. But the important thing about terrain like this, I've got lots of different pieces of large terrain like this, but the interesting thing is to add little character elements to make your terrain set up a bit more interesting. So let's have a look at those. And this is the kind of thing I mean. So in these small boxes, I've got barricades and bits here. And these are the kind of sort of little scatter terrain you might want to throw around to make your battlefields look a bit more interesting. There's a few bits here from some old Games Workshop terrain sets, the security tower sort of ones, or the outpost towers, I think they were called. So they're really nice for setting up. You know, that's a very nice objective. And then I've got a heap of these containers and bits and bobs. These, I think, came from Kill Team. There's some stuff here from Deadzone originally. There's some wooden boxes that came from War Cradle Scenics. And a whole lot of oil drums. I love oil drums. There's nothing better than setting up just a little bunch of oil drums like so. It just looks really good on a tabletop. It's a nice cover, and it just makes your tabletop look a bit more interesting if you're doing a sci-fi one. So I've got a whole heap of those. In the bottom, some great terrain. This was Kill Team originally, I think. This lovely orc stuff. This is really good for scattering around a sci-fi or post-apocalyptic themed tabletop. Really, really nice. I've actually built some over the years. This is, oh no, I bought this one. This is a foam one. It's very, very light. Just a nice barricade. I have built some. They're not in here. We'll get to it soon. My friend Will made these little mine markers, which, you know, I've used a couple of times. And there's even some cardboard stuff here. This comes from a company called Tinker Turf. And I'll show you that later because I've got a huge range of it, even though I haven't used it much, but there's some nice gantries and ladders and things like that for it. So there's some more stuff. That's a little barricades and boxes box. Actually, that was barricades and bits. Now we've got barricades and boxes. And this is more about these things, which came from AT40. No, it was Dust. Dust Tactics had heaps and heaps of these. So So I've got lots of those. They're very handy. They don't really go in scale with those other boxes, but they're good for barricades. Dust Oil also had a lot of these huge tank traps, which are kind of handy. Then we've got some other tank traps of this sort. Again, the scale is way out, but you know, if you use them separately, you don't notice that. And these are quite lovely. These came with AT-43, the old Rackham Sci-fi tabletop miniatures game, and they made gazillions of these, and also the shipping containers I'll show you later. Really nice little barricades. Some of them are like double-sided, like that, double height, and they've got hazard stripes painted on them. These are really good for doing a whole line of fortifications. Now, I tend to break up my storage into sci-fi and fantasy because they're sort of the largest categories. So this is fantasy rocks, walls, and bits. These are some extra terrain that came with the Warhammer Underworlds game, or for the Underworlds game, which occasionally I use. These I use a lot. These are very old. They're metal things of crates, piles of crates. And I bought these, must have been back in the late 80s, I think. And I've used them so much. They're just really good, aren't they? It's surprising, some of these things, you collect them over the years, how difficult it would be to find something like this now. This one I bought later. I think this is resin, but it's a similar kind of thing. They're great for fantasy games. There's some walls, I think, these are from, where are these from? Oh, these are from Rackham Confrontation, the last version. They had these little walls in it. Got some more boxes and things there. These are some objective markers. These came from the game Conquest, Last Argument of Kings. And then other little bits of terrain here. Again, that's an Underworlds thing. Some more walls. And then down here, these, look, check these out. I made these back in the 80s too. So it just goes to show you can have all this fancy terrain, but you can still make some pretty cool stuff. And this is made simply with a piece of foam core, and then little chunks of foam core taken out. And this is just cardboard on the top as slates, and then painted up. It looks pretty good. And the base, I think, is just, I think the base is just cardboard too. Look, it is. It is too. They're really light. There's a whole heap of them, as you can see. They've got metal slates on the top. I should paint those a different colour. I think I put some textured paint on them to give them a bit of texture, and a few of these little squares of cardboard, give them character. And they've served me for years and years and years. So there you go. Very easy to make your own stuff. These are some rocks I bought along the way. I don't know what they're made of, resin or something, but there's some sort of different coloured rocks. Usually most of my rocks and things are grey, so it's nice to bring these out occasionally. I actually bought those originally to use with Mythic Battles Pantheon. I've got a special box here for Dystopian Wars. You know I love Dystopian Wars. I actually made these icebergs. I think I've got a tutorial online somewhere about how I made these, but they're just chunks of foam, really, painted. And they look really good, really simple, covered with a gloss varnish, so they have that glossy ice look. Really good. And of course I've got lots and lots of the actual terrain that's available for Dystopian Wars. All these little islands. You can buy these in various different kits in separate boxes these days. And then there's all these platforms as well. There's also platform sets. I've talked about those in the past. And, you know, mines and wrecks and everything. So all for Dystopian Wars. There's some more of those large platforms. I've showed you those before, and more islands. And these are great crystal sets. And again, these are great for sci-fi games. The little crystals slot into the bases like so. And in fact, you could probably use this for Dystopian Wars as well, out in the Arctic with these enormous crystals just floating in the ocean. It looks pretty good, doesn't it? These came with a set called Operation, was it called Frostbite? I don't know. It was for AT-43, again, that science fiction miniatures game. They brought out some great stuff. Such a shame that game died. And I've got a few of those. So I've got 2 sets worth. It came with a set that was a campaign set based on alien frozen planets. So they came with those. So some pretty rare terrain there and really nice things that you can bring out for a sci-fi game. Down here I've got a special box for Gaslands, and there really should be more stuff in here. Whoops. These are really good. These are tea tree lights. I bought these on Etsy, I think. So you can turn these on and they give you a little flashing light. Don't know if you can see it in this light. Probably can't. But anyway, they flash a bit. I use those for smashed cars, and I use it for other things as well, if tanks blow up and stuff. I made these gates myself for Gaslands. Very easy to make from bits of old sprue and bits of cardboard and bits of plastic. Threw some of those gates together. And I've got a few cars in here that I made. I've really got to play Gaslands more often. It's a fantastic game by Mike Hutchison, published by Osprey. So, yeah, if you haven't played it, make sure you play some Gaslands. I've got to make some more cars. Okay, let's go up to the next larger size of box. This box is devoted to epic scale stuff. And of course, that used to be just Epic 40,000, but now, oh, and Adeptus Titanicus as well, of course. But now, of course, there's the new Legions Imperialis coming out, which is the new epic scale Warhammer 40,000 game from Games Workshop. So, there's some nice terrain here. Some of it is new. That's the newer stuff. You can see the newer buildings. Some of it is very old indeed. This comes from a very early edition of Epic. I can't remember if it's Epic 40k or one of the early ones. I think it's Epic 40k. Came with this plastic terrain, which I've mounted on thin MDF and made it a bit more interesting with a few bits of gravel and stuff. So some very nice terrain there. I still use that to this day. In fact, I just recently repainted these bases to make them look more grey-brown, because they were green before and they didn't fit my stuff anymore. These large ones are nice. Look at that. Really great epic scale stuff. And the great thing is, of course, is that they still match the scale of these new buildings. Look at that. So, you know, there's probably like 30 years between those two bits of terrain, and they still both work for Epic. This is the great thing about terrain, of course, is that you can collect it over a lifetime and keep using it. Now, you'll notice a lot of these things are very grey and brown and dark. However, when I got the game The Drowned Earth, which is a dystopian future post-apocalyptic world set in steaming jungles and lots of water and stuff like that, I had to get some jungle stuff. So things got very much more green, and I picked up some stuff from the aquarium shop. There's some general undergrowth, and these sort of long ones here, really nice. But a lot of these are old Heroscape terrain. So you can see the hex base there for the old game Heroscape. And they're just fantastic for terrain, aren't they? I wish I could get more of them, really. I could do with another couple of sets, but they cost a fortune on eBay now. Old Heroscape costs a lot of money. Got some lovely palm trees as well. I mean, really, why aren't more companies making stuff like this? It's so useful. And even bigger would be good. I mean, bigger scale, because this is, you know, a bit small for a 32mm miniature. But really, really good. Perfect for Drowned Earth. And occasionally, if I want to sort of get a slightly more colourful tabletop, I bring all those out. Well, what would a sci-fi tabletop be without craters? And I must admit, I don't use these a lot, because sometimes they stand out a bit on the tabletop too much, and that's because I think this old grey colour scheme doesn't really match the mats I'm using these days. So I may have to repaint parts of these, perhaps make the area that's blown out and the bit around it more dirt coloured, and then have a few rocks and things. My whole idea originally was to have a very grey planet. I've got the big plastic terrain tiles from Games Workshop, and I painted those grey, so these were made to match those. But yeah, I've got to use them more often. These are the old Games Workshop ones. They're not incredibly detailed because they're sort of made from vacuum form plastic, but they're pretty good, as you can see. And there's a whole range of them. And then they brought out these ones, which have bits of terrain in them, and they're even less detailed. I don't know why. They're not fantastic, but when they're painted up, they look good. There are also these Games Workshop craters, which come in sets like this, so you can mix and match them together to make a crater, like so, or you can just use one as a barricade, which is pretty cool. Yeah, there's a whole range of these in here. In fact, this was an attempt to put some resin in them, some clear resin, which failed miserably, but still it looks kind of like ice now, which is fun. And you can see these are sort of crashed spaceship or escape pod. There's even some green meteorites, glowing meteorites that have smashed down there. So if I need craters, I go to this box. Sometimes there are dedicated terrain sets that just need their whole box to themselves. This is the Graveyard. I don't think this is available as one set anymore. You can get bits of it in various other sets. But it's the Games Workshop Graveyard. It's got some lovely sepulchres. and mausoleums and things in it. Again, a little bit small. I know these aren't supposed to be huge buildings, of course. Though that kind of would work as an epic scale building, wouldn't it? Now that I think about it, never thought of that before. You could say it's a huge cathedral, but actually it's just a small tomb, and there's also some graves and things like that. And there's a whole series of gates here which were very painful to paint. As you can see, lots of detail on them. But if you want a graveyard feature in your game, and of course I have an army of the ghosts, what are they called? Night Haunts in Age of Sigmar. So if I ever play with the ghosts, this graveyard comes out and gets some use. Similarly, the first set of Warcry had some great terrain, and that's all here. I particularly love this ruined head, like so. And it's got some great buildings, as you can see, and, wooden walkways and things like that. There's a bell there as well, a bell tower. It's pretty out. It's extremely fragile with those skeletons hanging off it. Some very, very nice terrain. And I love this kind of really spiky barricade stuff, which is great for any fantasy game, really. Skeletons tied to it. Some really nice stuff there. Warcry have always done more terrain. And of course, I've got more of it to show you in a moment. Now, talking about Warcry, we've got all the recent Warcry stuff, which is the stuff set in the gnarlwood. I've got a few bits to paint, but most of this is painted. Lovely terrain. I'm sure you've seen this in some of my battle reports, these fantastic gnarlwood trees and all the bamboo platforms. I won't get it out of there because it's all carefully placed. It's quite fragile, as you can see. And of course, it's got all these lovely big skeletal remains and things like that. So a whole box full of Warcry. In fact, there's that pyramid is down in the bottom there as well, which you saw in the last Warcry battle report. Just jumping back to sci-fi for a moment, this is full of Deadzone buildings. Deadzone by Mantic Games. I've still got some to paint. These are just the little clips. These are from first edition Deadzone, and if you look through my old videos, you'll find that I've got a 5-part series on painting the miniatures and terrain from Deadzone. And it's still useful for all kinds of sci-fi games. These are really nice modular buildings, as you can see. I use them for the Drowned Earth recently, because they look a bit ruined and everything. Look at this great tower. You could use them for Necromunda as well. So very multi-purpose, lovely modular stuff there. I've really got to paint some more because I've got more from the most recent edition of Deadzone. Good game, Deadzone. I've really got to play it again. Now, talking about trees, we have trees. Now, these are the old Citadel trees. Well, not this one. This is a resin thing that I just picked up from somewhere on eBay. It's the old Conan hanging on a tree being eaten by vultures, which is cute. These trees, which I think are sort of nicer trees than the more recent one, but though, of course, they are smaller scale, and that's just the problem with them. They're quite small scale, but I love the way you have these bases, like so, and then you put your trees on them. And I've never actually got around to finishing painting all these properly. I really should. There's a lot of detail on these trees that I haven't painted. I've got them in grey colour and brown colour, depending on whether I use a more grey bottom board or a green bottom board. But isn't that a nice wood? And it's just a shame they didn't make more of this, and perhaps with larger trees, because they're kind of really tiny trees when you get someone next to them. And I've seen boards that have huge bases of trees that just go up to there and then get chopped off, and the scale looks so much better. It looks like you're in a giant redwood forest or something like that. So I have quite a few of these I picked up over the years because it's hard to get good trees. It's one of those things that there should be more of, I think, making more trees. Okay, the way I store things is often in terms of buildings and terrain. They're two separate things. So I've got sci-fi and fantasy buildings and terrain boxes, and they're just sort of general stuff I've picked up over the years. So this is the sci-fi buildings box, and there's a whole lot of stuff here. These are the lovely modular buildings from Ash Wastes, which you saw in my Ash Waste battle report. Took me a long time to paint those, but they're really impressive. Oops. Also very fragile, so I've got to be careful I don't break off these gubbins. That's that. This one I've used a lot. It's probably Necromunda terrain originally, and I do have some more of this Necromunda terrain that I haven't got around to painting yet, but this is an incredibly useful one that I use all the time. It's just a really nice silo to have in the middle of a compound. Also here we have, let's see, sometimes you've got to pack this really carefully so it fits in the box. I've got two of these Imperial outposts. This is just the base, And there should be some more pieces in here somewhere. There we go. So that goes on top like so. Where's that lovely natural light I had a moment ago? Seems to have gone overcast. No, that's how tall it is. So they're really chunky pieces like that. I've got two of them, and they make great defense line with some of those AT-43 barricades in between them. Really, really nice. And also those guns I showed you right at the start of this video come from that set as well. So you can set up a gun in the middle there. Okay, I've just added a bit of artificial light to the natural light. So this is an old bunker for, again, AT-43. They made this lovely bunker. You can see inside. I haven't used this much at all. I really should. This is just how it came. I haven't even done any extra painting to it. So it came pre-painted. Really nice bunker that. You could put some kind of installation on the top there. I should experiment with that. There's also some tank traps here. I think these were from Gale Force 9. Really nice tank traps, those ones. And that's about it for this box. Okay, continuing with sci-fi buildings. We've got ruined buildings here. And here, this is a weird thing. I picked this up from an online store once. It's just an alien thing. It struck me as being very Tau, Warhammer 40,000 designed. It also looks a bit like an iron on its side, doesn't it? It's a sci-fi building. It's kind of interesting. This is another that's made of foam. This is another foam thing, which is kind of a generator. It actually has a piece somewhere that fits in the side there. And then we have some lovely big solid ruined buildings from Gale Force 9. So I wanted to get my hands on these for a long time. They went out of print, but then they decided to finally remake them. And aren't they great? I mean, they're just classic ruined buildings. You could use them for fantasy or sci-fi. Really nice. When you're talking beautiful detail, of course, it's Games Workshop. These are the ruined buildings from I think the first edition of Kill Team. They're lovely. They're really detailed, but they always feel a little bit small scale to me. Because they've got these huge Gothic windows and elements, and then you get your models next to them and they just don't seem to gel. They're really nice, and I do use them. It's just that I just wish they were a bit bigger. I did a video on this stuff relatively recently. It's Warcradle Scenic's MDF terrain, the Prometheum refinery. And I meant to paint this. I haven't got around to it, of course. One day when it's painted. I mean, it looks fine pre-done like this, but painted will look even better. I must get a game together using this, perhaps Necromunda or Wild West Exodus would be really good. But as you can see, it's taking up a whole box on its own. The MDF terrain is great, but it does take up a lot of space. How are we going, folks? Having fun? We're only halfway through, less than halfway. Shipping containers. A sci-fi game can never have enough shipping containers, and I've got an entire box full of them. Now, this one, well, two of these actually are Warcradle Scenic's MDF, but most of them are AT-43 boxes. There's a couple of dust tanks, which one day will get painted in the distant, distant future. So all the rest of these lovely shipping containers from Rackham. And they made heaps of these. They would release figure sets and you get a free shipping container in them, which seems unheard of now. But they're lovely, aren't they? And these aren't even painted. One of these, I think I've added some paint to it, but it's hardly necessary. This is a really nice medical one with a air conditioning unit hanging off it. But most of them are just this plain design they used over and over again with different graphics on them. Really good. And if you want to build up a sort of shipping container warehouse or dock or something, having a whole lot of these really gives a lot of verticality to your tabletop. More MDF, again from Warcradle Scenic's, who have very kindly sent me some freebies over the years. I did a video on this stuff too. It's the Amiga Outpost. So some really nice bunker stuff here. And I really should paint this one up. There's a whole lot of stuff in there. But, you know, again, it looks all right without being painted. You can put this on the tabletop just as is. But the whole sci-fi battle line there. Now, I was talking about breaking it into terrain and buildings boxes. So this is sci-fi terrain. And here we've got some nice foam boulders. As you can see, rather than those brown ones before, these are grey. This is the old terrain from Warhammer 40,000, which edition? 6th? I don't know. It had this lovely ruined spaceship in it. And I didn't get this edition at the time. I managed to get these second hand, and somebody had already painted them. Didn't they do a great job? This is one of those rare times where I you know, was happy with somebody else's paint job and just left it how it is. So whoever did that, thank you very much. Managed to get those. There's the main thing. This is some more terrain by Gale Force 9, and they made this lovely stuff for War Machine. And if you remember War Machine, haven't played that for a long, long time. They were really big for a while, and then they just sort of slipped off the radar completely. But they made this lovely kind of atmospheric terrain for it. What else have we got in here? There's some bits of, this is foam bits, so bits I've picked up over the years, really. I think Will made this too. Will's pretty good at making terrain. He should do more of it. We've got some, this is part of that set. That's it there. This lovely piece. I love this, you know, this stuff from Gale Force 9 is so solid and heavy. It's really, really good. And then I made some of these, some little objective markers, general sci-fi objective markers, which I use sometimes. There's some more foam stuff. These are solid again, more Gale Force 9, very, very solid ruin bits. There's another one under there, so that's for big, chunky sets of ruins. As you can see, you can use them for fantasy or sci-fi. There's no overt sci-fi elements on them. Now, I'm sure you're all starting to think this is getting pretty excessive, but remember, this is a lifetime's worth of terrain. I probably started collecting terrain back in the 80s, so I've been lugging it around with me ever since, and it's been in storage facilities and things like that. Now I've just got it all together and organised. Fantasy buildings. A lot of fantasy stuff in here. This is the Minas Tirith ruins from Games Workshop. This is their more recent Age of Sigmar ruin stuff, and you can see the level of detail there. That took a long time to paint. All the fiddly little gubbins there. We've got, oops, that's more Age of Sigmar stuff. There we go. We've got these lovely realm gates, or they weren't called realm gates at the time when they were made, but these lovely gates, 2 of those. And this Wizard's Tower, which is a beauty. Let me set it up. Well, I had to set up this stuff because it's some of the most beautiful stuff in my collection. This beautiful Wizard's Tower, that's the, well, I don't know what it's called these days. I think it's still available, but this is one of the most impressive pieces I've got. Took me a while to paint, I can tell you, but you can see it's absolutely chockers with detail. Very beautiful set. This piece comes away like so, like that. This is the old Wizard's Tower. It's a 3-piece thing. It's got the old Winds of Magic pattern on the floor. Really nice for your generic ruined tower. Whoops, this is more Age of Sigmar stuff. This is where they're getting a sort of a bit overly detailed and weird for my taste. You know, how often are you going to use something like this? It's very specific. But you know, it's all right. It's just, yeah, a bit over the top. I like stuff that's a little bit more generic, like this tower. The gates, as I said before, that goes into there. So there's some lovely fantasy stuff to really make your tabletop look quite fantastical. You can also exchange this for that if you want to. You can take off this, take that. There we go. Wow, what an amazing thing. And could I just point out, I wish Games Workshop had stopped making things like this. You know, it looks great, but that thing must have broken off about 20 times. It's too fragile for terrain because it's really hard to store. This is going in a box like this, so it's very easy to knock off pieces like that and break them. So yeah, terrain's going to be a little bit robust, I reckon. Well, we've had fantasy buildings, now it's time for fantasy terrain. There's a whole box of that. A couple of bits from Warcry, which I just love. Or maybe they're Age of Sigmar. I don't know, but I use these all the time. I love that ruined guy. This is something I made years ago. Again, a bit of MDF and a couple of rocks. And you can see how easy it is to make impressive terrain. You know, you could spend a fortune for that. And heaps of stuff here from TH Miniatures, who make a fantastic range of resin terrain. Go and check out my old videos on it where I show how I paint it and everything. But there's all the volcanic stuff below there. I've got 2 different ranges from them, this volcanic range and this sort of general fantasy range. I've got a sort of tower base here. Lots of lovely stuff, but I use these a lot, just little barricades and things like that. Really, really useful. You can see great scatter terrain and cover and all that kind of thing. So a heap of that. These I use a lot too. They're the towers from an old Games Workshop or Citadel terrain set. I think it was called Arcane Temple or something like that. And I use these for all kinds of things. I've used them for Aeon Trespass to make the board look a bit more interesting. They're really good. Oh, I've used them in Blitz Bowl as well. So they're just sort of generic towers, which are really good for using in other contexts. So there's a heap of fantasy terrain in there, all kind of smaller scale stuff. You know, it's only as I'm getting all this out of the ensuite bathroom and onto the table and showing it to you, I realise how much there is. There's a lot of stuff here, isn't there? These are old rivers and hills. Now, I've got two different things. Way back in the, probably in the early 90s, I wanted some river sections and I couldn't find any decent ones, so I made them myself, again on MDF like so. I don't know what this is built up with on the sides. Some kind of, I don't know what it was. Anyway, they're very, you know, quite solid, lots of textured paint. Originally I painted these blue because they were rivers, and probably these were green. But then when I went sci-fi, I decided to make them grey with sort of a toxic sludge river instead. I made a whole heap of these, and I very rarely use them these days, but there you go. These are two hills from Rackham when they did the latest version of Confrontation. They made these lovely hills. And then I've got the big Citadel hills that came out at the same time they came out with the big plastic tiles. So again, these don't get used too often, but there's some really large. I like the fact that they're big scale and they fit together in various modular patterns. So there's some freestanding hills in there as well. So definitely got plenty of hills. Something completely different, an entire fantasy village. This had lots of other little detailed bits and bobs, which I didn't keep because they were a bit flimsy, but I kept these main buildings. These, of course, are by Battle Systems, who make Core Space, that fantastic miniatures-based game with all their amazing terrain. And these are really nice. They're pretty solid, and as you can see, the detailing on them is fantastic. I particularly like using this for Moonstone because it's got that sort of whimsical, more whimsical fantasy feel rather than the really serious feel. So they're really good for Moonstone. Okay, we've got some MDF stuff here by War Cradle Scenics, and I've showed you these in videos before, but you've got the Norse village there. I think it's called the Eston Village, is how they sell it. There's also a Wild West Exodus building in there. You've seen all these before in other videos. There's the rest of them village. So towers and things. One day I'd love to paint these as well if I ever get time, just to make them look even more realistic. But they take up a lot of space, but they're really cool. Now let's float back through, or down, memory lane, because we've got some old Mordheim terrain here. Mordheim, the Games Workshop game in a fantasy city. And this is the old terrain that came with this. So this is just past original Necromunda vintage and still alive to this day, astonishingly. So there you go, it's cardboard with bits of plastic on the edges just to keep it together. And also down here are Gorka Morka sets. Now it's hard to get these out because they're pretty fragile, as you can see, but they're still really nice buildings, aren't they? It's a shame that just the cardboard isn't a bit more solid. I don't know where I picked that thing. Oh, that's from Gorka Morka, I think. This thing I just picked up somewhere along the way. So yeah, look at these big. Aren't they lovely? See, that artwork is still great. To me, this is like classic Games Workshop period, this kind of thing. Really, really nice. And not too fancy, you know, it's generic fantasy, which I really like. It was the gritty fantasy of the old world. Ah, the old world. Yeah, and then Gorka Morka had these kind of barricades and things. These are the same plastic barriers they used in the original Necromunda, and they used them again for Mordheim. And there's this whole thing as well. Oh, look at that. Pretty impressive. I mean, when you put that on your tabletop back then, you really made an impression. Still impressive to this day. So there we go. Oh, look, and there's a building there from some other manufacturer. And a bridge from somewhere else as well with the Japanese feel. There's all kinds of things thrown in this box. Now, I mentioned Dust. Here's Dust Buildings. This is a game I haven't played in a long time, I must admit. But I do have a few buildings here. They had this set of huts, which are good. I painted these up. I used a bit of an airbrush even to give them a camouflage pattern. I've got two bunkers, and these were available separately. Oh, hold on, I tell a lie. I've got three bunkers. So if I ever need a bunker, there's no shortage of bunkers. And all these bunkers, because they came for the different factions, have their own gun. So you can see, so they're pretty impressive. Look at that. That's the Axis, I think. Or maybe that was the Allies and that's the Axis. Or maybe, I don't know, the other one's the sort of communist one as well. That one's probably the Allies. So, or is it? I don't know. I can't remember. But they also have figures that go with them, the men that can go in there as well. So have I ever used them? Probably in one game, I think. But wow, they're impressive. And then we've got a whole heap of terrain made from the modular stuff. And it's all kind of along these lines. Like this. Now this stuff comes, you know, in pieces, these corner pieces and all these pieces. And for ages I just had it sitting in plastic, and then I actually put it together and started chopping bits out and making it look ruined, and came up with a whole lot of ruined buildings. And they're still semi-modular, I think, but really just as they are, they're really handy. So you can see they came like that originally. So they're really good for city-based games, and of course Dust, really good. I've got a whole heap more of them in here that of course I haven't got around to doing anything with. But really, how much do you need? So you could use those for generic sci-fi games as well. Now I mentioned TinkerTurf before. They're a company that makes this very nice cardboard terrain, and it's lovely and solid. As you can see how thick that is. It's like 3-ply stuff. You can see these are like shipping container type things, and there's a whole lot in here. This is like for a maglev track, and wait, there's even more. I actually backed this campaign myself many years ago. Have I done a full tabletop using this stuff? No, I haven't. It's great for Necromunda, but look how solid that is. Oh, well, when all the legs are on, those legs just fit in. You can see the engineering here is really nice and solid. And it's got that really thick card, which I think makes all the difference. So you get the idea. Really solid. Lovely stuff. Big maglev things, all kinds of pieces. Wow, I mean, I really should get this out and make a tabletop of it. It would look pretty amazing. But there you go. They make a whole range of this stuff. So if you're interested in this kind of terrain, which obviously is cheaper than plastic and extremely modular, check out TinkerTurf online. Well, my friends, you've been very patient. We're getting to the big boxes now, so we're almost finished. Here is a big box of MDF terrain by War Cradle again. This is the Necron terrain, which I've featured in a video all of its own, so you've seen all that. And on top of it, I've got this old Games Workshop landing platform. Wow, they don't make them like this anymore, do they? Look at the size of that. There's my hand, it's huge. And I've just never painted it up. I'd love to paint it up because it's got these big fat legs as well. So it's got some verticality to it. All this stuff can fold up to make a wall. Yeah, really impressive piece. I don't think that's been in print for quite a long time. So yeah, really got to paint that up, because if I got something like that, let's just try this out, like that, and then if I went over here and found, you know, one of my ships, for example, this old tower one, you know, that's going to look really good when it's painted, isn't it? Very cool. So if I took this thing and look at that, yeah, see, that looks great. Even unpainted, that looks great. This is a great toy, isn't it? It's fantastic. I really keep my eye out in toy stores for stuff like that. For some reason, they never seemed, these really cool ones never seem to make it to Australia or New Zealand. You have to buy them from overseas and they cost a fortune. But yeah, look at that. Very, very cool. That goes well with that. Now here's a box I'm very proud of, my old Necromunda terrain. This is from first edition Necromunda, and wow, they don't make them like this anymore. Some fantastic buildings and pieces here. As you can see, there, there's plastic bits that held them all together, like so. So this is cardboard and plastic. Still looks great to this day. I mean, I think I've got a relatively recent Necromunda battle report where I use this stuff. There's a separate outpost thing down there as well. As you can see, pretty flimsy cardboard. Unfortunately, they didn't have really thick cardboard back then. Look at that. But great graphics. And to me, you know, this just brings back classic games of Necromunda to me. I don't know, things just seemed a little bit more light-hearted back then. Everything's so serious now, which is one thing I'm not crazy about. I did actually mount some of this on MDF, so here's just an entrance or an underground entrance, and I put it on this and added a whole lot of gubbins to the floor and everything. And yeah, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Look, there's a little sump there. And even just some of these doorways, separate doorways, I added bits to make them a bit more interesting. Just absolutely classic terrain, this. Absolutely classic. There's a bridge. I should bring this one out because I have done a bit of work on the base. There we go. Just a beautiful multi-layered piece, perfect for gaming because you've got all these lines of sight and everything. And I just made it a bit more interesting by putting a bit of stuff on the base, like so. It's a nice solid piece, isn't it? Really? I mean, this is flimsy cardboard, but this plastic keeps it all together, and it still looks great as a Necromunda piece to this day. This is what, 1995, something like that. Now this one's a bit weird. AT-43, which I know I talk about a lot, but is the old sci-fi tabletop miniatures game by Rackham Entertainment, and unfortunately they folded before it really took off and made a lot of bad decisions. But it's a really good game, and it came with some poster maps which had walls printed on them, and I thought, well, that's not good enough. I'm going to have to make the walls. So I actually, and these are fit together like a jigsaw puzzle, so I won't take them out because it takes ages to put them back in. So let me just take one out. So there we go. Here's a wall. It's made of 3 pieces of foam core put together, some textured paint, or maybe just normal paint on the outside, roughly painted. And it's pretty solid. And the other thing I did, of course, is put magnets in the bottom. So the whole plan was, and it works, I put a big sheet of metal down, thin stainless steel metal, with the poster map on the top, and then these go ka-chunk into place on top. And it looks really good. And it just, you know, again, you'll see it in some old battle reports of AT-43. And also, this is the only time I've experimented with electronics, and that was to do this landing pad. A normal one there, but this one has landing lights in it. Let's plug it in. Okay, is that a thing of beauty or what? I'm still proud of it. I did it years and years ago, but I'm still proud of it. Let's just turn this light out here. There we go, that looks a bit better. These LEDs have lasted forever, and really, I just stuck them, they're under there. This is a bit of like really cheap foam that it's made of, and a bit of cardboard holds them in place under there. And look, it's as rough as guts, but it looks fantastic. When I play AT-43 and I bring this out, it's ooh, ah, by all concerned. So yeah, I should do some more with these LEDs. They just work really well, and they last and last. These have been going for a long time. The other thing I made at the time, because I was really into AT-43, it just really floated my boat, were these tiles. So instead of the map, I made these tiles to go together to make generic sci-fi areas. And, you know, I've got to do another battle report of AT-43 and use these tiles, because I'm really proud of these too. They're ceiling insulation tiles, like so, and they fit together nicely, and I've just done a little bit of terrain mucking about. Look at that. I mean, that's just dug out in a rock there, and it really looks like some of the rocks have fallen down. There's little things stuck on them as well. Bits of gravel. Look at that. Really works. So it gives it a bit of, you know, 3D nature to the board. It's not all flat. I love gaming mats, and they're extremely handy, but you just don't get that lovely 3D feeling. Something dug into the board itself, which I think is quite special. So yes, I'm going to bring these out again because I'm very proud of them, and I think they look really good. It's long overdue for another AT-43 game, even though it's incredibly obscure and hardly anyone plays it. But of course, as you can tell, it's all about the views here on the Esoteric Order of Gamers, isn't it? Well, I have one more big box left, and it's not terrain, it's dust. When the dust stuff was owned by Fantasy Flight Games, and then they decided to get rid of all their old stock when they got rid of the license, this stuff was quite cheap. It was remarkable, and it's incredibly high quality. The detail in these vehicles is astounding, and this is one of these projects that one day I'm going to set up, get out the airbrush and do a whole lot of painting, because this one's pre-painted. This is one of the premium ones. They look fantastic painted, and they're just gorgeous figures. And you know, Dust is still a good game. You can play the 1947 set of rules and it's still fun. You can play it on a grid, or you can play it as a normal tabletop miniatures game. And sadly, it's no more. I mean, someone else may take it up in the future, but I've got a pretty good collection of stuff here, and of course a lot of men for the armies. There's a lot of vehicles here, and there's even a couple of planes. They'd look so good painted, wouldn't they? So that's another project. I've discovered a lot of little projects for myself here, going through this terrain. Well, my friends, that is it. The Esoteric Order of Gamers terrain collection. It's all out here now, and I've made a complete mess, and now I've got to pack it all back in its rightful place, back in the bathroom. But yeah, you've seen it all. Well, there you go, my friends. A good old rummage through my lifelong collection of terrain for tabletop miniatures games. Very proud of it. It's taken a long time to get together, a long time to collect, and a long time to paint. But pretty much I've got any sort of piece of terrain I need on hand every time I play a game. It's funny how some pieces get used over and over again. I'm going to mix it up a little bit and do some more interesting things. I haven't used those rivers for ages, for example, or the craters. Some more of those buildings would be great, the dust buildings. So, oh, and also, of course, the AT43 tiles, which I'm going to use soon, because it's about time they came out again. And that's the great thing about terrain. You can not use it for decades, and then out it can come again for a game, and it still works just as well as it did way back when you first made it or bought it. Okay, I've been talking for a long time. I will let you get back to your lives. I hope you were inspired by some of the stuff in this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button and the all notifications bell. We're always looking for new subscribers, and it's always good to grow the channel. I'm on so many social media channels now, I can't keep track of them all, but just go to my website at orderofgamers.com and you'll see a whole list of them, except for Blue Sky. For some reason, there's no icon for Blue Sky yet, which is just weird. Anyway, I update them all, some more than others, but they get the major updates of everything I do at the Esoteric Order of Gamers, so you can keep track of what's going on. But the best way, the absolute best way to keep track of everything that I do is go to the Patreon page where you can support the Esoteric Order of Gamers and, you know, make sure it keeps going on into the future and thriving day to day. Because I put a lot of time and effort into this, and a bit of money really helps out a lot. So if you enjoy my stuff, go and check it out. Here's the address, and you can get a feed there where all the latest stuff comes up. There's also a Discord channel which anyone can join. There's a link to that on the website, where there's a nice little community of people talking about board games, tabletop miniatures games, showing off their miniatures, and just a general bunch of good gamers. That's it, everybody. I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.